Hi everybody, and welcome to our first lesson after the introductory video about the course. So this will be a bit theoretical lesson. It's very important to set the base for the knowledge about the QRadar before we jump into the installation and the GUI. So it's important to understand the QRadar architecture, the different models that exist inside IBM QRadar portfolio, and also have some insights about key functionalities inside the QRadar ecosystem. We will touch base the HA deployments, and finally we have quick information about the backups. So basically I will rely here on the IBM documentation. It's one of the best. I can tell you I have experience with QRadar, with ArcSight, and I have a course for ArcSight if you can check it out, the Micro Focus ArcSight bootcamp, step by step. And this is the QRadar course that you guys are watching right now, and I'm planning also for the 40 SIEM course. So I can tell you that IBM is one of the open vendors regarding their QRadar documentation. So if you just go to Google and write anything in your mind regarding the QRadar, 70 to 90% you will find the answer. Their documentation is open and available and very good. Next come Fortinet. 40 SIEM is good as well. Their documentation is good. And the last is Micro Focus. So if you go to Google and just write IBM QRadar documentation 7.5 is the last version. For sure you can check also salary or interview questions. Okay, so the first link here will bring you to this page. So you can see here everything from getting started till to planning, installation, configuration, everything. The documentation is very nice and to the point. So let's start right away. So the architecture of IBM QRadar is a modular architecture. So basically they have three core functionalities or three layers. So they have the data collection layer, they have the data processing, and finally the data searches. So inside the data collection you put some appliance, or even you can make it a virtual appliance called event collector or a flow collector. So this is event collector basically collect events from your firewalls, from your proxy servers, your Unix or Windows log sources. And the flow collector is to collect the flow data from your routers, switches, or any log source that's able to provide flows. So basically guys, what's the difference between events and flows? Events is something that happen in time, just in time, and you want to know about it. So like user login, like a firewall deny, like a VPN connection establishment or termination. All of these are kind of events. From security perspective, it's important to collect, and the event collector will help you in that regard. Regarding flows are network activity information or session information between two hosts that you want to know about. So you are not just waiting for event to happen, but you are always getting the flow information about what's going on inside your network. And this is one of the key things about QRadar, that they give a great focus to flows alongside events. So for example, if you check ArcSight, they don't have this convention about flows. or they don't stress it or give it the same attention like IBM. So and even in 40 SIEM also they are not emphasizing on the concept of flows, but in IBM they have a separate interface for the network flows. It's and they have it's good to show it to you, so you get my point. So I've just log in here. We will have in the next lessons how to install the IBM and how to check the interface, ingest data, and all the course agenda that you have seen in the introductory video. So I just want to give you the convention about the events and the flows. So here the IBM QRadar, you will see a log activity. So these are the events. Okay, and you have a network activity, so here are the flows. So IBM gives this attention for the flows. As you can see here, flow is nothing but a network activity between source IP, destination IP, and port. So it doesn't need to be something matching your firewall or something matching your IPS to trigger some signature that is matched the firewall policy or the IPS signature to trigger an event. This is a continuous network activity information about what's going on in your organization. And by attention given by IBM, I mean that they give a separate like tab inside their platform. They designed out of the box rules that is concerned about use cases, important use cases like scans, for example. So if someone is doing a port scan or port sweep or this kind of things that you are not able to detect يعني successfully unless you have the flows information. So they designed these use cases. They give them good focus. Okay, so they have appliances for this as well, as we will see shortly, that they have flow appliances to collect the information. So this is the first layer where the event collection or the data collection happens in terms of events or flows. Other data that is collected as well, like the configuration data for risk manager, QRadar risk manager. So this is another appliance in the setup. We'll learn about it shortly when we come to the QRadar components. And they have packet capture for forensics. They have the vulnerability manager to scan your network and capture vulnerability information. So all this collection is taking place and ingested to the ecosystem through the event collector and the flow collector. So what is the function of the event collector and flow processor? Collector, sorry. So just take care, guys. We have a data collection, data processing. When we talk about data collection, we will say event collector, flow collector. When we talk about data processing, we will say event processor and flow processor. So what is the functionality of the collector? As the name indicates, it's collection and then parsing. Parsing means that you pinpoint the relevant attributes inside the logs and understand what this attribute is all about. For example, in any syslog from a firewall, I can tell this is the source IP, this is the destination IP, this is the source port, this is the destination port, this is the firewall action. So this is the parsing, how to extract the relevant and useful information from the unstructured logs that you are getting into your event collector. And it's the same for the flow collector, how to extract the source port, the bytes, like we see here, the destination bytes, the source bytes. So this is the parsing. And then normalization means that you put all these attributes in the common event format or the schema of the QRadar, that the databases of the QRadar is designed to understand. So this is a normalization. So event collector, flow collector is doing this core functionality. Then coming is the event processor and the flow processor, where the processing are taking place. The processing here means the matching of the flows and events against the rules configured inside the system. So you have something called CRE, or custom rule engine, inside the QRadar system, which is nothing but your configured rules, your configured logic or brain to detect things like scan, if we are talking about flows, or malware detection, if we are talking about events, for example, or anything that is required, like a detection of usage of privilege accounts, or shared the privilege accounts, or something like this. All of this logic is you configure inside the QRadar, and the event processor and flow processor are responsible for matching this this parsed and normalized logs and flows against this common against this custom rule engine. So custom rules are here inside the event processor and the flow processor, and also they are doing the data storage. So you are not storing anything on the event collector and flow collector, except in very odd scenarios, when you have the event collector is not able to reach its event processor, so it can capture or can, let's say, queue the logs for some time until the event processor is back again. Okay, so the normal functionality of event collector, flow collector are not doing any data storage. The data storage is actually happening on the event collector and the flow processor, event processor, sorry, and the flow processor. The third core functionality or layer is the data search, which is happening on the QRadar console. So by modular architecture, we means here that you have 3 layers. Actually, you can merge all these layers in one layer, which is called all-in-one deployment. We will come to this in a bit. So it's modular. You can start with all-in-one and then expand as needed. So it's a scalable architecture, modular architecture. So these 3 functionalities should be there in any QRadar deployment, regardless of the size and the complexity of your setup. So if it's very simple setup, very small setup, all-in-one setup, the 3 functionality will lie on the same appliance. If you are considering very huge enterprise, the 3 functionalities will still be there, but it will be distributed maybe across multiple sites, multiple branches, and so on. And this is one of the nice things about the data collection, that if you have this big customer with multiple branches, you can put or install event collectors, flow collectors across these remote branches, and this will help you to distribute things, and you can collect the logs reliably in these remote branches, and then the event collector and flow collectors have the functionality to compress these logs to and send them on schedules to the main office or the headquarters, to their connected processors, to manage the WAN connectivity and manage or get around any kind of slow WAN connections or so on. So this is the good thing about the this modular architecture. So going to the components, so again, I'll just wrap up. We have a console, we have an event collector, event processor, flow collector, and flow processor, and we'll come across these 2 things, data node and app host, in a bit. Okay, so mainly the flow processor, as we can see, can collect one or more, the flow processor process flows from one or more QRadar flow collector appliances. As we said here, it's talking about the flow processor can actually getting flows from multiple flow collectors, not necessarily to be one flow collector. So you can have multiple, as we said, in multiple branches, and also it can collect external network flows such as NetFlow or JFlow. So I have here one diagram. All of this, as you can see, guys, from the IBM documentation, and you can pinpoint here the URLs for the documentations I'm navigating with you guys. So here is nice diagram that is showing what we mean here by external flows. So this is a typical flow processor, typical setup, distributed setup, not all in one. So you have the QRadar console connect to one flow processor and the flow collector. So you have here the data collection, the data processing, and the console or the data search. So the console is nothing but to do graphs, reports, generate alerts and offenses. The user interface basically is done in the console. So coming back to this diagram, you have the typical setup here, and you are collecting flows. So this is the flows normally you are collecting to the flow collector. So you have a router here, so you have one switch connected to this router, so you can make a span port where the internal flows are sent to the flow collector, or you can have a tab where the internal flows are sent to the flow collector. So the flow collector is not just it's not a packet capture where the network traffic sent to it is just sent to flow processor. It's not just a relay. No, it's extracting, as we said, it's doing parsing and normalization and send attributes, as we saw here. This attributes is sent to the flow processor. So it's not just relaying the packets it's getting. So on average it's extracting like 348 bytes from the packet. So if the packet is like 248 bytes, it will just take like 348 average and send it to the flow processor. Okay, and this is the external flows we are talking about. So if your devices support NetFlow, JFlow, IBFix, you can send it directly to your flow processor. No need to send to the flow collector. If you want, you can send to the flow collector as well. So that is what is said here, that it support this as well. The documentation is very good, guys. I'm not just want to read the documentation for you. I'm just trying to put you on track and guiding you on where to find the information. So I'm just highlighting the very important information, and you can get more information through IBM. And also here there is one important information that telling you that the QFlow, the QRadar flow collector, sometimes they call it QFlow, it's not sending the full packet. This is exactly what I just said. So if you want to have a full packet capture, you can use another component called QRadar Incident Forensics appliance. So this leads us to the next page, which is QRadar appliance model. What are QRadar appliance models? If you in Google again, if you write this, you will be guided to the M5 appliance overview. Actually, if you open this one, you will be we will come here to the generation of QRadar M5 appliance overview. Actually, this is not the latest version, so Google crawlers are not yet getting the link to the M6. So you just need to come here to the M6. So M6 is the latest generation of appliances. So inside the this page, you can see the different appliance models QRadar is providing. So you have the QRadar XX05, XX29, XX48. You have the network QNI. This is nothing but like the same like the QFlow, but it's giving more information from the network activity. So it's not just extracting this attributes that we see here. it's adding more information like the hash value of the files. It adds more deep information. So it's an option as well. So you can see here you have the IBM QRadar event collector or Qflow collector. It's one appliance that is actually doing the two functionality. So you can use it as a collector only. You can use it as a flow collector. Okay, so as if a Qflow collector, the appliance provides high capacity and scalable layer 7 application. So this is to use it as a Qflow. As a dedicated event collector, collects and parse events from various log sources. So as you can see, you can use it as a dedicated event collector. It is the same appliance. You can use it as a dedicated event collector, or you can use it as a dedicated flow collector. Okay, and it's based on Lenovo system. And as we said from a while, you can configure the Qflow collector or the event collector to temporarily store events and only forward the store events on schedule. Okay, so you can manage the WAN very well and get around any slowness that you have in your network. Okay, so let's see what is mean by by XX05X. So actually you have this models. Actually the XX is the functionality. So if you are using the same appliance, or this means that you can use the same appliance for multiple functionality. So for XX05 you can use it as event processor, flow processor, event and flow processor. As you can see, multiple functionality. So the functionality of event processor is noted by 16. So 1605 will be the QRadar event processor. So when you install the appliance, you will get a menu option which functionality you want, and this will turn the appliance to be 1605 if you selected event processor. If you selected it as all-in-one, and all-in-one is nothing but all the functionality or the 3 core functionalities of data collection, data processing, and data search. So if you have if you are planning for a small customer or small to medium enterprise where the all-in-one is more than enough for them, so you can just purchase one XX05 appliance, and while you are doing the installation you will select the all-in-one option. And this is exactly what we are planning to do in the installation lesson. When we make the installation, we will select an all-in-one, because this is just a lab where we have one virtual machine and we install the virtual appliance, and we will select the all-in-one option. So the appliances of QRadar, this is the naming convention for the XX05. You can use it as hardware appliances. You can purchase hardware appliances, or you can purchase it as virtual appliances, as physical appliances. Okay, so the same thing will be for the XX29. So again, event processor is 16, so 16, it will be 1629 if you are installing event processor on the XX29 appliances. So 1729 for the flow processor. So you just change the first 2 digits, or we can say that the first 2 digits are related to the functionality, and the last 2 digits are related to the appliance type. So 1605 is event processor on the XX05 appliances. 1629 is an event processor on the XX29 appliance. Okay, so as you can see from the table, the specifications below, as you move from XX05 to XX29 to XX48, the specifications are getting more higher. So here, for example, just to compare quickly, guys, if we go between the QRadar 00 XX05 and XX29 and XX48, so we can see quickly that, for example, for the all-in-one appliance, so it will be 3105 and 3129 and 3148. We can just identify that the smallest appliance is XX05. This is the one that you consider for small customers, because the maximum for all-in-one here will be 5000 EBS and 200,000 flow per minute. So actually two figures or two important things you need to consider for the license in QRadar: the event per second and the flow per minute. So as we explained, you have two things that you are ingesting into your QRadar ecosystem. You are ingesting the events and you are ingesting the flows. So the event per second is very important, and the flow per minute is very important thing to consider while sizing your system. Okay, so if your customer is small, doesn't have a lot of branches, it's only one side that you are collecting the logs, the EBS is within this ranges. So the maximum we can see here for the 48 XX48 is like 30,000 EBS. So if you are if your customer are below 30,000 EBS, so consider the QRadar XX48. If, for example, the customer EPS is like 20,000 and the flows is less than 1,200,000, so like let's say 1 million, so this appliance will be okay. If your customer is like having or requiring like 10,000 EPS and 200,000 flow per minute, so the XX29 will be okay. If your customer is below very small, like this is the like let's say the starting appliance for a very small customer, so this one will be okay. If you are considering this appliance as event processor, this is the specification. So 20,000 EPS. Again, if we check here for the 29, it will become double 40,000. If we check for the 48, it become 80,000. If we go for the as a flow processor, it's 1,200,000. Here it's 2,400,000. Here it's 3,600,000. If you configure the appliance to act both as event processor and a flow processor, so the figures will come down. You will actually reach the same as the all-in-one. Okay, if you check here again, the event and flow processor option is the same as an all-in-one option. Okay, so this is another information that you can check. This is the front and rear panel of the QRadar appliance and the legend for this image. Okay, okay, so all-in-one option is nothing but, as we said, the three functions will be there. So you will have the data search functionality, you have the collection functionality, so there will be an onboard collectors and onboard flow collectors and event collectors. So you just configure your devices to send the logs to the all-in-one system. So you don't, the setup is very simple, one appliance and everything is pointing to that appliance, or either the other way around, if it's database, for example, or something that the appliance itself pull the logs from the log source. Okay, and as we said, you have to consider the maximum rates for this all-in-one. So here given an example, if it's 3105 all-in-one appliance, you can collect up to 5,000 events per second and 200,000 flows per minute. Okay, so why we need to expand an all-in-one deployment? As we just explained, if your data collection exceeds the collection capability of the all-in-one, you need so you have more than, let's say, you have more than 30,000 EPS, or you have more than 1,200,000 flow per minute. In that case, you need to consider to add event or flow collectors. You need to consider to add event or flow processors. You need to expand your setup. You must collect events and flows in a different location. So even if your customer is small, but still it has branches in different sites, so you need to have flows and event collectors. Or you are monitoring higher rate bucket based flow sources that are faster than the 50 megabit per second connection on all-in-one. So if we think a bit about this 50 megabit per second, I will open my calculator. So the maximum we have seen for an all-in-one was this one, the 0048. So you can see here the maximum is 1,200,000 flow per minute. So if we bring our calculator here, 1,200 million event flow per minute, if we multiply a flow by 348 bytes, an average byte size for a flow, and then multiply this by 8, because a byte contains 8 bits, so this will bring us to the bits inside a flow per minute. So if we divide by 60, this will be the bits per second for this is the rate actually in bits per second. So if we divide this by 1024 to turn it into kilo, and then by 124 to turn it into mega, so it will end up with like 53 megabit per second. So this is what they are trying to say here. If you are having flow sources that have higher rate than 50 megabit per second, so you need to consider the event collector and the flow collectors. So if we remember, guys, when we talk about the QRadar appliance overview, we have an appliance here. So beside these three models, note, guys, that these three models cannot act as a collector. As we see here, these appliances are only processors or all-in-one consoles, or even risk manager, vulnerability manager, other things. I will come to this, but they are not able to be collectors. So QRadar has a specific appliance for collector, this one that we see before. So you need to consider this appliance if you are talking about or expanding your deployment to add more capacity. You need to consider the flow collector or the event collector. So you can add a QRadar flow collector which collects up to 3 GB per second. Okay. So distributed architecture is something or turning from an all-in-one to a distributed architecture is something unique about the modular setup of QRadar. So you can start with an all-in-one and then start adding collectors, event collectors, flow collectors, event processors. You can start adding and migrate things. So it's a scalable architecture. Okay, so what are data nodes and app hosts? So data nodes are nothing but the ability to expand your storage requirements. So as you know, there are companies that are impacted by regulations, and they need to have more retention periods for if personal information or PCI data or something that requires like 2 years, 3 years of storage, you need to consider more storage capacity, and data nodes will help you with that. And as you know, guys, not all the data are treated similarly, so you need to make good data classification to know exactly which data is important, which data needs more attention or needs more retention period. And this diagram is showing how to attach like data nodes to your event or flow processors to increase the search performance, to increase the to have longer data retention periods, like 2 years here. So we have 2 data nodes attached to this event processor. And the important thing about data node that you cannot attach data node to multiple event or flow processors. However, you can attach multiple data nodes to one event processor. So it's one to many, but not the other way around. So one to many, you can add as many data nodes as you want. And the nice thing about data nodes that they are plug and play. They can integrate seamlessly with existing deployments. It reduces the processing load on processor appliances by offloading the processing, the storage processing to them, and you can scale as you go. It's very, very nice, and this is important that you can consider any of these appliances. So coming back to this appliances, guys, the model XX05, it can act as a data node, and the functionality for data node is 14, so it will be 1405 or 1429 or 1448. So if you check here the specifications in the storage, you will see that the 48 has like 13 terabyte available to store event and flow data. However, this is a bit confusing because, as we said, the specifications are getting higher as we move from XX05 to XX29 to XX48. However, in terms of storage, we will see that the 29 will have the highest storage. It can store up to 77 terabyte of events and flows, while the 48 here can store, as we just said, up to 13 terabyte. So all other so if you are talking about 3148, this is the all-in-one. So 3148 is the all-in-one or the console. It can store up to 13. Okay, but any other appliance XX48, like for example, if it's a event processor, if it's flow processor, whatever, it can store up to 15. So it's very close, but this is just very detailed information about the difference, but it's still in the range of 13, 15. However, the 29, it can store 77. So again, the all-in-one setup or the console has less. So you have to take care of these guys, that the same model, the storage difference based on the functionality. So always the all-in-one or the console has less, bit less, not that much, less storage than the other appliances. So because it does make sense, because this appliance has more functionalities. It's doing, actually, this is the layer of the data search, so it's making graphs, reports, alerts of a user interface, a lot of things. And if it is doing as well all-in-one functionality, so it will do again the custom rules and parsing, normalizing. So the storage for it is a bit less than others. So the XX05, the storage for it is interesting. It's only 6 tera or 8 tera. So we have again a wrap up for the storage. This is very important in when you size. So 6 tera or 8 tera in terms of XX05, it's 64 or 77. This is the highest in terms of XX29, and it is 13 to 15 if it is the XX48. So you need to compromise between the different models when you make the sizing. So because maybe you will say, oh, okay, I need the XX48 appliance because it can provide me with 1,200,000 FBM and 30,000 EPS. Okay, this is a good thinking if you are just considering that it is an all-in-one appliance, and my customer, for example, is 25,000 EPS. So okay, this will be a good match. But also you have to consider the retention period for the logs for that customer. Maybe yes, 25,000 EPS and 1 million flow per minute, but this customer has like, I need 1 year of retention, 2 years of retention. So if you check the storage, maybe this will not be sufficient. So yes, you can consider this, but at the same time you need to add that data nodes, the component that we just talked about. So in that case you will purchase like three appliances, because you need to make like HA for the data nodes, or even 4, because you will make 2 for the console and 2 for the data node. So additional appliance will be added because you need to consider storage. So why not to consider the 29 in that case if the customer is below 15,000 and below 300,000. So matching the EPS with the appliance only is not the only figure or the only criteria that you need to consider. You need to, yes, I need to match, and also I need to consider the storage, and if the things are not you cannot achieve by one appliance, you need to consider the distributed architecture to add event collector, event processor, data nodes, and so on. Okay, so the app hosts, this is something that is available in the system, in the QRadar, since version 7.3.2. So you can only consider one app host per deployment, and it is nothing but to manage applications. So instead of installing the applications on the processing appliances, here the processing appliances are already doing other things like storage for the event flows and the custom rules, the CRE. So no need to load them with the apps as well. So that's why IBM introduced the app host, where you can install it and put one big one. You have here the specification, so you can consider this one, which will allow you to run all the apps. IBM has a lot of apps and very useful apps, so this is a big consideration when you are designing your QRadar setup. I encourage you to have at least one medium appliance, so you can have many apps running in your environment. And it's also, from best practice, is good to isolate the apps from the other system and the data for the apps from the other system components. The HA deployment, it's very straightforward. So you, at each layer you can have primary and secondary appliance. So at the collection layer you can have event collector as primary, event collector as secondary, flow collector as primary, flow collector as secondary. On the data processing layer you can have event processor as primary and event processor as secondary, flow processor as primary, flow processor as secondary. And finally at the data search layer you can have a QRadar console as primary and QRadar console as secondary. And this is important for best performance in large deployment. It's strongly recommended to use a 10 GB per second interface for your HA crossover. So basically this crossover cable should be at least 10 GB per second. If you don't have this in your infrastructure, you can consider bonding multiple 1 GB per second interfaces. And these are the scenarios that trigger the HA. like the power supply failure, like manual failure or RAID failure. Finally, the backups. The backups are very important in any SIEM solution. So again, data classification is important to design your, as we talked about it in the retention. So backups are important. The data classification is important because again, the retention is may differ from one data type to another. So for example, personal identifying information may require longer periods for compliance reasons. You need to separate data from configuration. By default, QRadar backup only 7 days of retention. So you may need to make on-demand backups for your major configuration changes. So for example, if we just implemented new use cases, like a major change that we added like 5-6 new use cases, we can take backup, configuration backup just prior to this one, because maybe these use cases will make some performance degradation to the system. So at least we have a good snapshot from our configuration. And as we said, it's important to do these backups and to put them on some external system for longer retention and for safety purposes. Okay guys, so I think now we are in good shape. We recognize the system, we know what the system is doing, what are the different components, and we are ready now to start the installation. And from there we will proceed with our course. Hope you enjoyed this lesson and see you in the next lesson.